Hello and welcome back to the Hibs Observer. I'm Liam Bryce, joined today by our special guest Joshua Barrie, the editor of the Rangers Review. Just a bit of extra pre-match content for you folks, trying out something a wee bit different to try and get the lowdown on Hibs opposition this Sunday. So Joshua, thank you very much for joining us. How are you getting on?
No problem. Good to be in your company. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I've watched a lot of not so good Rangers performances this season. They've been up and down, real mix. But yeah, yesterday was or Thursday. I don't know when this will go out. A better day for them, obviously in the Old Firm. But this season has been very much a story of some good performances, in particular in Europe, followed up by some bad away performances generally throughout the course of the season. So I think there's still quite an element of unknown as to what type of Rangers performance you'll see at Easter Road on Sunday, despite the fact that they were really impressive against Celtic in that Old Firm win.
Cool, we'll get straight into it in a wee moment or so. But just as always, folks, a wee word for our sponsor. Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include second gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash and even Oasis tickets. So you can get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com. So Josh, as you were kind of alluding to there, it's maybe a kind of something in common, I think, maybe between Hibs and Rangers this season, certainly from what I've seen, is that they're teams where from week to week you aren't exactly sure what you're going to get from them. You say Rangers have been very up and down, as you say, some good results in Europe, some poor results domestically. So I suppose for folk who don't, follow them every week, what's going on there? What's behind that?
Well, obviously, there's been a lot going on kind of behind the scenes at the club, which has fed into this season. Started the season away at Hampden. The squads went under a lot of change, and they've signed some exciting young players, but they've had to cut the wage bill as well. And domestically, I'd say for the majority of the season, their performances haven't been great. The win over Celtic and the performance over Celtic comfortably, I think they're best in both regards of the season. But the confusing thing with Rangers has been they've went away to, I think it's 7 unbeaten away from home in European competition under Clement, whereas they've already lost, I think, 4 games away from home. It might be 5 now. I'm not sure. In the Scottish Premiership, only one team has scored fewer goals. I think Ross County, the Rangers in the Scottish Premiership away from home, 9 in 9 games. So you really have got two sides to them. You've got the side you saw yesterday at Ibrox, who are better, I think, in particular, Liam, in games where they don't have to set the tempo with the ball. So when teams set off them a little bit, and I don't think it's so much the kind of cliche, they can't break down a low block. There's an element of that. But I think for Rangers, it's actually more they struggle to build the ball kind of patiently and control games away from home. So when teams come to Ibrox, naturally they're going to sit off a little bit more. Although I think if you cast your mind back to the Hibs-Rangers game, that was an occasion where Hibs were probably pretty unlucky to not get a result. But generally, teams will sit off a little bit more. Rangers will get into the final third easier. Whereas if you take the Motherwell and the St Mirren game, it's only really when the opposition go ahead and on both of those occasions between Christmas and New Year, and then naturally have a lead to protect, the Rangers manage to sustain some pressure around the opposition at final third. And so that's, I think, the difference between home form and away form. In Europe, they've been really good. You can't criticise them at all. But I think domestically, you're still waiting to see, is this a template that can win games at the consistency which you need to what Rangers fans want the team to do, which is win the league. And I think the Hibs game is so important for Clement, because if Rangers lose or if they don't get a result, are they back to square one? Kind of, because they'll drop further points behind again. So it's very much about, I think, Clement trying to build a bit of consistency, which he's not been able to do for a number of months. But that away form, the type of performances they've put in away from home this season, has very much been a pattern, and that's why the results have been really inconsistent.
Yeah, so with that away form in mind and kind of what you've alluded to there in terms of why Rangers have seemed to struggle on the road domestically, if you were David Gray, Rangers coming to Easter Road on Sunday, so how would you approach the game to try and make it difficult for Rangers?
I would probably do a not dissimilar thing to what Rangers did to Celtic and let the centre halves have the ball. because, for example, Robin Propper, I think, had a really good game against Celtic. He's not great with pacing behind him, so I'd imagine that Hibs will look. They've obviously got a lot of pace in the forward areas. I know against Hearts they played that kind of like Josh Campbell's. He wasn't really a number 10. He was a number 10, false number 9, and the two attackers ahead of him. I don't know what you'd call that, but that type of system I could see giving Rangers problems. They have Nico Raskin for this game. He's suspended for the Dundee game because he got a yellow card in the Old Firm game. But generally, I would say, just as a rule, if Rangers have to like set the tempo in a game and they have to break down a team, they have to play through a team, they struggle a little bit more when the game is end to end. And it'll be interesting to see how Hibs approach the game, because I imagine that Easter Road will want them to go for it and get after Rangers. But I think that you might just see them sit off a little bit more and ask that question of, can you kind of be the protagonist in this game? Because that's what Rangers have struggled to do. Now, is it that they kind of sleepwalk, whatever it is, into those drop points against someone really needs in, don't they?
Somebody really does need it. I hope this isn't an emergency, because we'll have to cut this short, but we'll take our chances on it for just now.
Yeah, must be a parcel. Whether they've started those games against St Mirren and Motherwell and been too comfortable, and I don't know, but it's a pattern where they don't spend enough time around the opposition box. They take too many shots from distance, and that leads to them, leads to an end-to-end game, which often suits opponents more than Rangers. So I think if you're David Gray, you want to sit off the centre halves a little bit and try and use that pace in behind. But equally, I'm sounding a little bit critical of Rangers. Equally, they've shown they're a team that can put together really impressive performances away from home. And if Hibs do open up a little bit more, if they do try and get the wing backs high and leave space for Rangers to play into, then they do have players in the final third. Danilo, Egaman, Yanis Hadji coming back into it. Nadim Barami had a good game in the Old Firm as well. Václav Černý. They do have a number of players who, when there is space, can be pretty effective.
Yeah, so as you say there, in the occasions that they have turned in good away performances domestically, what is it then that's clicked that Hibs should be wary of?
It's honestly not happened that much. I mean, the Dundee, the Ross County game, I think Rangers are top of the joint top of the league if you look at their home form, and away form they're right down mid-table. So again, there's a clear pattern there. The Ross County game away from home, Clement's changed the system a little bit, and I think it looks quite good when you've got, so Danilo starts as a number 10, and Egaman starts as a number 9, and Hadji starts on the left. Jefty's your kind of flying fullback from left back. You've not really got a right back at the moment. Ridvan Yilmaz did well against Celtic, but if you've got Ridvan and Černý on the right-hand side, that's two players who really want to cut inside. So when it's worked well, I would say that Rangers have had a sufficient goal threat in their team. Outside of Egaman and Danilo, they don't really have that. Will both start? I'm not entirely sure, because Danilo's he's still being used kind of delicately, I would say, as he's coming back from injury. Nico Raskin's made a big positive impact in the midfield, and the fact that Rangers don't have him for that trip to Dundee will be difficult for them. But when it's worked well, I think is they've started well in the game, but they've had an element of control, whether that be introduced by having enough attacking force that you naturally spend more time up around the opposition box, whether it be that an opponent sits back a little bit. Dundee United at the start of the season started pretty negatively at home, and that gave Rangers a bit of a foothold in the game. And the individuals, Raskin, Danilo, if they have good games, it tends to lift the level quite a lot. But as I say, I think a lot will depend on the fact that if Hibs ask Rangers a question of, you set the tempo, you have the ball, we will hit you in space. We'll hit space in behind Robin Propper with Martin Boyle or whoever else might be up top, then I think that's where there is a threat for Rangers coming across to Leith.
Yeah, and you said as well that Rangers maybe haven't responded particularly well to going behind in these away games.
No, I mean the St Mirren game was a weird one because they were much better after half time, and it felt like if you, and I realise you're speaking in what ifs, But if Rangers had managed to get results against St Mirren and Motherwell, and then that result against Celtic, I think the mood would be very different, and there would be a belief of, oh, they can go and do something and at least put pressure on in the title race. But they've not had consistency. There was a big melodrama about Philippe Clement's use of the sports science argument, which I think is it's the way it's communicated, but it's a completely valid point. He needs to use his squad. His squad isn't strong enough. And when he's got his strongest starting 11 out there with Danilo and Igaman and Raskin, etc., then if that team started both those games, then Rangers probably, I'd argue, maybe even if they don't win them, they don't have the results that they eventually did have. He started Dowell and Dessers against Motherwell. He started, I can't remember who he started against St Mirren, but it wasn't Raskin and Danilo, and that kind of came back to bite them as well. So you might see more rotation. Yesterday in his press conference after the Old Firm game, Clement was kind of explaining why using the win as an opportunity to remind people that rotation was important. If you take a Cherney out of that team, or a Danilo or a Raskin, even an Igaman, there's just not the depth at the moment to get Rangers over the narrow margins that they're winning by away from home, because their expected goal difference away from home in the league is something like 0.5, which is pretty low. They're not creating a ton more opportunities than their opponents, and when they don't have the strongest team available on the pitch, that's kind of come back to bite them, I think, in those two away games before the win against Celtic.
Yeah, it's like you say there about the sports science stuff. It's, is kind of perfectly valid, but I think sometimes with managers, it's the timing of when you choose to deploy these kind of things, not when the fans are up in arms. It's probably not the time to put that out there. So you've mentioned a few guys there: Igaman, Cherney, Bajrami, Yanis Hadji looks as though he's come back in a bit of form. Who's the main threat at the moment?
I'd say Rangers' most important player at the moment is probably Nico Raskin in the middle of the park. Hibs, obviously, you'll have to tell me how long they've been playing a back 3-4, but certainly a few games before the Hearts game.
Yeah, it sort of came in around the Aberdeen game at home, which was the exact date escapes me. They'd kind of experimented with it a couple of times here and there. It made a couple of appearances in pre-season, half against Dundee United, but it's round about kind of a date in November. Surely somebody in the comments could help us out. But it's been a while. They are bedded into it now. Put it that way.
Well, and I thought, watching the Edinburgh Derby, I thought Hibs were really good on that day, and the way they used their wing backs, and I just thought the system looked pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of wins that battle, whether it's the Hibs wing backs who push Rangers back, or the other way around. Obviously, as I mentioned, the fact that Rangers are probably going to play two left footers on the right is a little detail that could have some significance. But in terms of the players that people should watch for, I mean, Igaman, he has been such an interesting player because he arrived with an injury. He missed about 2-3 months of the season. He popped up for the first time away at Parkhead when Rangers were 3-0 down. And he still does things in games where he doesn't make runs that you think that there's a real rawness to him. And then he scores individual goals that you forget all about that. So there's definitely a lot of attributes there. And when he puts it together, which he has done pretty consistently, he's an exciting player. Hadji has improved the team again. There was a whole debacle with him at the start of the season. Danilo, if he starts, his goal per game ratio is pretty good at the moment. But I'd say that the most important player has been Raskin, and Diomande's improved playing next to him too. Obviously, Connor Barron started in there at the start of the season. The back four of Rangers, though, is the area that you look at, and you looked at it before yesterday's Old Firm, and you think, "Oof, that's you didn't expect a clean sheet." And Liam Kelly did really well, especially with the ball at his feet. I think the threat is the space in behind Robin Proper for Rangers. You saw both St Mirren, more St Mirren than Motherwell, but St Mirren in particular target that space with Olasanya, which then meant that Dujon Sterling had to do a lot of running to cover Robin Proper in behind. So he's a player who, if the game's in front of him, I think he's more comfortable, even though he's not necessarily fast, he can read it. But when he's getting turned the other way, especially if his left back has gone up the pitch to help, which Jeff too often does, that is an area I think that will be somewhat concerning for Rangers going to Easter Road on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like probably something that Hibs might seek to exploit with the likes of Martin Boyle. I said we're a few kind of injury doubts for Hibs at the moment. Not exactly sure what the team is going to look like come Sunday. Those knocks have been mounting up over the past few weeks, so it's going to be an interesting one because as we talked about at the start, and Patrick and I talked about on our St Johnstone post match where we touched on a wee bit about this game. It's two teams where you're not sure exactly what you're going to get from them week to week. Hibs have found a wee bit more consistency. As you saw, David Gray's now been named manager of the month. He took 12 points from a possible 15 across December. But still, the kind of the performance at St Johnstone, individual errors creeping back in, a wee bit of wastefulness, which were problems that sort of just really plagued Hibs in those first few months of the season, kind of showing that those are still hanging around. But it's certainly going to be an interesting game. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think it will be. And it really, I could see Rangers going there, and if they go there and put in a good result and performance, then it will be. I could see that continuation of what they've done in the Old Firm, carrying on that momentum, because they do have good players, and the team that they started against, Celtic, has a lot of athletes in it, a lot of quick players. It's quite a young squad, which you haven't been able to say about them for certainly in earlier parts of the season. But also they have just been so inconsistent that conceivably they could start slowly. And if they go behind, do they have the attributes to sustain pressure on Hibs, not concede counter-attacks with the pace that Hibs have? I'm not entirely sure. So start of the game will be important. And I think it'll be an intriguing game, as it often is.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway is don't put this game on your coupon in any way, shape or form. Josh, some great insight into Rangers, into Hibs opponents for this weekend. So thank you very, very much for that. As I said, folks, just trying something a wee bit different. If you like this kind of thing, do tell us and we'll endeavour to do a bit more of it as the weeks go on. But yeah, Josh, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you folks for tuning in. We'll catch you on Sunday for Hibs against Rangers in the Scottish Premiership. We'll have full coverage of that as usual on our website and on our YouTube channel. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll catch you all again very soon. Cheers.